Good morning. Firstly, a personal statement. Someone stole my truck. I had a truck right there. It was a big truck as well. I'm just gonna give them a couple of. I'm just gonna give the enemy base a bit of a scare. Try that, you f***ing bastards. That's actually really annoying. I'm just gonna shoot at the trees, trees. I hate them. Yeah, I'm bringing down the thunder. I am bringing down the thunder, and it's wet and wild. F***ing tree. So, any questions? So that's kind of just one kind of aspect of the stuff I do, which essentially is just put stupid stuff online and on TV and anywhere that anybody will let me do stupid stuff. I'm actually quite intimidated to be here. Obviously, like Claire, a bit of an outsider. I'm not a glamour like you guys. Although I actually remember this morning I actually spent about a year working as a casual library assistant in the Auckland library system, which was actually like one of the best jobs I've ever had, mainly because I got to put the books on the shelves and put them all in the Dewey Decimal System, and that was really therapeutic. It was one of my favourite things to do, and I also worked at the Ponsonby Library for a little bit as a casual library assistant, which was great because nobody ever went into the Ponsonby Library. So we just played classical music in the afternoons and just sort of got sleepy, which was awesome. So yeah, as I say, I'm quite intimidated to be here to talk, kind of be invited, and thanks very much for the invite to talk in a sector that I don't really have that much to do with, although obviously I use the stuff that you guys do quite a bit. So intimidated that on Monday night, at the sort of meeting thing at a restaurant, I tweeted this. That was on my second beer, and my friend Morgan tweeted back, I wouldn't take that personally. And I pretty much tweeted back to him. It definitely isn't helping. Thomason's already sort of given you a rundown kind of my background. I'm just going to run through it very quickly because I made the slides. Again, I was a news and editorial director at 95 BFM for a couple of years. I can't even remember when that was. It was so long ago. Basically, that amounted to setting the news agenda for the station each day and then sort of freaking out when volunteers wouldn't turn up to read the news in the afternoon, which meant I had to work 10-hour days kind of thing. But it was a really rewarding job and I really enjoyed it. I then moved on to TV. I was a field reporter for Media 7. You might remember the Media 7 TV show. It's a panel discussion show about media issues that was hosted by the blogger Russell Brown. That was on TVNZ7 until the government decided that they didn't think the channel should exist and pulled all the funding. At that point, I've got to say as well, this is the first time I've used Keynote, so you're going to get a lot of that. I've used literally every transition in the whole program. So you're going to get barn doors, you're going to get mosaics, everything. And then the program, by the skin of its teeth, moved to TV3. We were there for a year until they decided they didn't think we should exist. And now the program has changed into Media Take, is now on Māori television, and is going very strong. But after that, I moved on to work at The Spin-Off. I'm a staff producer at thespinoff.co.nz. I don't really know what the term staff producer means. It's pretty vague. I kind of do everything there. I produce video, I also write. I do illustration as well. I'm on staff there. The Spin-Off is a culture website. I've got a slide up there. And it's sort of run by the journalist Duncan Grieve. And we've recently just expanded into covering, initially it was a television review site, but we've also moved on to sports, books, which is really good, one of the strongest sections of the site, run by Steve Braunius, and we've also got Politics and Media Society, run by Toby Manhire, and a couple of other people. The Spin-Off is kind of interesting because we're looking at new models of kind of paying for cool stuff on the internet. So we have sponsors and we have advertising partners. And we're just trying to, as I say, trying to navigate this difficult transition time for publishing and media, trying to find a way where people actually pay us to do the stuff that we want. So far it's working pretty well, but it's been pretty hard work. We're also interested in working, this is when I do a little bit of a plug for work, we're interested in working with institutions like yourselves. I've just done a series of videos for Callaghan Innovation. So I'd be really interested in working, and like, for example, if you want someone to make, a podcast series about your collection or an online web series or something like that, or even want someone, a really great writer, to come in and write about your collection and the stories behind your collection, just give us a bell. So I was trying to figure out exactly what I kind of do and what I'm interested in doing, what excites me, and this kind of is the closest that I've come to it. This is from a really awesome book called Out on the Wire by Jessica Abel. It's a comic book, and it's a non-fiction examination of that kind of new public radio narrative journalism, I guess you could call it, that's happening at the moment in the States. So you've got shows like This American Life, Radio Lab, Serial, stuff like that. And basically, this is a book that's just totally for narrative nerds, people who love reading about how other people make stories. It's really interesting. It's also really informative about it if you want to start doing your own podcasts and stuff like that. And so I recommend it. This is Jad Abumrad. I keep on mispronouncing his name, even though I listen to his show. He's one of the co-hosts and producers of a podcast and radio show called Radio Lab, which is a long-running show and really awesome. And this is him in the book saying, I want to experience the world as ideas flowing through people. And that's kind of the closest I've got to kind of what kind of excites me and what I like doing. Because all of the jobs that I've had is about explaining complex ideas to our audience. And the easiest way to do that is to kind of get people who are interested in these ideas and enthusiastic about these ideas, and get them to tell their story, and get them to tell the audience what's exciting about this particular idea or this scientific innovation or this concept. And I kind of see my role as a journalist, as someone who produces stuff, I see my role as a facilitator of that and trying to, mould that into something that people will be interested in watching or reading or viewing. This is the reason I'm here. So in 2014, after Media 3 got cancelled, I moved straight on to the Naughty Bits, which had been in kind of on the boil for about 3 or 4 years. What happened was the director of the production company that I worked in, Top Shelf Productions, they produced Media 7, Media 3, they produced Target, they sort of ran the Choice TV channel for a while, and they're involved with that still. The director actually managed a couple of years ago, probably about 5 years ago, managed to get his hands on one of the day books that the chief film censor of New Zealand used to keep. And basically these are big, huge leather-bound books where the chief censor would write I've cut out this from this movie, I've cut out this naughty bit from, Rebel Without a Cause, of which there were many naughty bits for the time, and just noted what they cut out. And he was reading this and thought, this is actually really interesting. Wouldn't it be great to do a documentary where we basically show you what people back in the day cut out? Firstly, as, what the hell were they thinking? That's ridiculous. Look how stupid we were back then. But also as a way, and as we developed the concept, as a way to examine how New Zealand has changed. And it turned out to be a really effective way, I think anyway, a really interesting way of examining that, a kind of lens through which to explore that. The process was sort of about 3 to 5 years. We made at least 2 or 3 promos trying to get broadcasters interested. Eventually Prime TV came to the party and they said they were interested in putting it on as 3 one-hour episodes. We went great. The boss went to New Zealand On Air. New Zealand On Air went great, gave us some money to do that, and then in 2014, it made pretty much the time I lost my job at TV3, Media 3, I was slotted right into that, and we started working on that. So I came on as a researcher. I was a researcher with another person, my colleague Will Pollard. We researched for about, I think in the end it was 2 months. It probably wasn't meant to be that long, but it kind of at the early part of the production period, it just kind of happened like that. And it was really useful to do that. And eventually, the original director they approached didn't want to direct it for various reasons. He became the producer, and then so I was asked to direct it, and I ended up writing it as well. We worked on a pretty small team. Was myself, was the producer, was a production manager, Alice, and of course, Will at the start as well. And that went to air earlier this year. You might have seen it. So people often ask me what it's like. Actually, I'll rephrase that. No one has ever asked me what it's like making a TV show. So here it is. I always respond. So people never ask me what it's like to make a TV show, and I suspect it's a lot like any other big project, regardless of what medium or what industry it's in. So this is kind of like the timeline. So you start off, it's exciting as all hell. You're finding out so many interesting things. You've got all these ideas, and you're really enthusiastic. Sort of, maybe a third into it, you're starting to get some roadblocks up. You can't particularly get this particular bit of archive that you want for various reasons, whether it's budget or rights-based. People have you're starting to get notes from the network. You're starting to get to the grind of it. But halfway through, it's a total bloody nightmare. You're sort of in the dark night of the soul. This literally happened to me. Well, not literally. I didn't get busted up. You'll see, because I'm going to play some clips from the documentary series, about halfway through, we actually shot the documentary series on a really sort of super cinematic thin ratio. So there's like black bars at the top and the bottom, which you usually don't do in TV, but we decided with our DOP, our Director of Photography, Clayton Carpenter, that this would look really awesome and give us a really distinctive look. At the beginning of the project, we told the Commissioner and the Prime, this is what we're going to do. Is this okay? They said yes. About a third of the way through, we went back to them and said, "Are you absolutely sure it's okay? We shoot like this?" They went yes. So we went great. We started shooting like that, and then about I can't remember exactly, but basically. I think we delivered the first episode and we're halfway through, almost finished the second episode, and they came back to us and said, "Oh, put it through technical," and no, you can't do it. And that meant that we'd already sort of been editing for a month at the very least. Our editor Jeremy would have to go back, redo the whole series essentially, including the graphic bits which you'll see in the clips, everything was composed for that ratio, so it meant a lot of work, a lot of man hours, and a big cost to the company. So at that point, I just sort of went home and just went into bed and just stared at the ceiling for about 12 hours. And then the next morning, we got an email. It was fine. They said, "Oh, actually, no, it's all good." So that was fine. So that's kind of like how projects work, I think. And, you sort of get to a point where it's awful and then it turned out all right. So there's plenty of things I'd like to redo, but ultimately in the project, I think it came out okay, and I think we got, some good feedback from it. I think, a reasonable amount of the population saw it. I was pretty happy with how it happened. So this is the first clip I'm going to show you. I'm going to probably show you 2, possibly 3, depending on the time. I'm going to show you a clip, and then I'm just going to talk about where we got the particular archive materials and what we did with them. And then after the clips, I'll probably go a little bit deeper and talk specifically about different institutions we went to get this stuff and the sort of user experience. And hopefully that'll be the most useful bit for you guys. And then we'll just go from there. And we might have some questions at the end if we have enough time. I completely forgot to do a timing on this speech, so we'll just see how it goes. So this is the first clip.
These paintings were first created and exhibited in the 1890s. Then, as now, the bare curves of Psyche from Greek mythology could barely create any controversy.
It's not pornographic to me. I don't think people should be upset by them.
They're all naked women. What's not to like?
Is it not art? Is it art?
No problems there. But in 1906, 2 picture dealers on K Road were hauled in front of the court for selling reproductions of these paintings and advertising them, like we have here, in their shop windows. The police dragged up some members of the Salvation Army, including this bloke who was clearly traumatised.
It made me think of wicked things when I was young.
Witnesses for the defence argued for the artistic merit of the paintings. They included an ex-mayor.
I will not say what I would like to say here, for there are ladies present.
A clergyman.
I don't intend to discuss French morals here.
And an Auckland Council contractor.
I see nothing that would shock me or my men.
If the case seems ridiculous now, don't worry, it was ridiculous then as well. Apparently unknown to the police at the time, Psyche at Nature's Mirror had been licensed 13 years earlier to advertise table water in America. Magistrate Kettle eventually ruled the images were not indecent. He made a specific distinction between works of pure art and other more obscene material. But a few years later, a different magistrate in a similar case ruled works of art could be indecent, saying,
"The strong meat of classic art is not for the delectation of society's weaklings."
Some clarity was needed. In 1910, a new act said a special case was to be made for material with artistic merit. But exactly how one worked out the difference between art and smut was still unclear, because as we'll see, one person's inspiring masterpiece is another's filth.
Cool. So as you can see, that's just a short clip, about 2 to 3 minutes long from the show, but we used a lot of archive. We knew from the beginning that we would need to really dig deep and use a lot of this stuff, particularly as we didn't have a presenter. Having a presenter for your show, your documentary, is really great because you can fill up time just by a dude walking around, like Nigel Latta styles, on a street somewhere kind of thing, and you can shoot that very easily. You don't need to go and track down visuals to use it. So we knew that we were going to need a lot of archive. Still didn't, for some reason, budget that well for archive, which was weird, but that's okay. I didn't write the budget. I wouldn't know how to be honest. So we went out and we found all this stuff. So to go through it, these 2 images, that's from an overseas museum, I think. We just went to one that had a really good system and a website set up. I can't remember which overseas museum it was, because this was over a year ago now. I mainly just put it up there because I just realised that literally looks like I've just gone to the photocopier downstairs and just printed them off, and I wish I'd actually just gone to somewhere and printed them off in big posters kind of thing. But they kind of do the job, and I think that's more or less the sizes that they were presented in at the time, in the beginning of the 20th century. These images were pulled off Flickr, I think. They were under a Creative Commons license. There was a collector who had put up quite high-res images, so we pulled them off. Now, So that was used by White Rock to advertise their beverages, and it's become quite a famous icon in America. So we went, well, we really have to go, obviously, to White Rock and sort of talk about using these images because they're advertised. There's an advertisement and one of their trays. And I was adamant that we needed to use them because I just thought it sort of heightened the ridiculousness of the situation that in Auckland in New Zealand, there was this huge furore about whether these picture dealers could put them up in the window. Yet in America, they were just all over the show, printed on trays, serving you drinks at home and in bars and stuff like that. So we went to try and find White Rock beverages. Went to their website. The website was quite interesting because it looks like it's been designed by whoever designed the Space Jam website. And every time you click on those, you can't hear the audio here, but there's like a little bubbling comes up. So we went, okay, this is not legit. There you go. And I found out if you just go really quick, it gets really noisy. I just wanted to throw that in there. They had one info email. We emailed them so many times through the production period and just never heard back from them. Tried to find a number to call, just never heard back from them. And I was so adamant that, let's go back. That we really need to use these that I just decided let's just use them, which is not kosher really, but the show wasn't going to be shown anywhere outside of New Zealand. We could probably argue fair use. Although I've just remembered that actually what I could have done was just use the actual paintings themselves, and we could have mocked it up into a tray or something like that without breaking copyright. So live and learn. That's not something that I would normally do, by the way. We pretty much went through a rigorous process of making sure that we had the rights, and I'll talk about that a little bit later. So this sequence in the court with these amazing cartoons, we found this huge cartoon in, I've written down Papers Plus here, but in Papers Past, of course. Whoops. So this is a full-page cartoon from The Observer, I think, from 1908, 1906. It was just incredible. I knew that we had to use it. So we did a lot of this kind of stuff, and you saw that sort of animated sort of sequence in the clip. Our editor, Jeremy, was great at using Adobe After Effects and animating stuff, and he really relished the challenge and met it. The great thing about Papers Plus is that, Papers Past, I'm joking, is that, and I'll talk about it later, but they put stuff in higher res, and we went back to Papers Past lots of times, as you'll see. Cool, so this is the next clip, and this is about Ulysses.
The novel was banned in the UK and America. In New Zealand, it was restricted to educators and literature students. The then collector of customs called it one of the dirtiest books he'd ever seen and thought it must have been written by a mental defective. Directed by Joseph Strick, the film, as in the book, featured some fairly frank discussions of sex.
I feel fire inside me. Thanks be to the great God, I got somebody to give me what I badly wanted, to put some heart up into me.
The film was so controversial it was banned in Australia and Ireland, and heavily cut elsewhere, and then it landed on the desk of the film censor of New Zealand.
He consulted upright citizens of Wellington mostly, and they generally, I think, came to the conclusion that you shouldn't cut it. There was a Roman Catholic priest, in fact, was one of the people consulted. He thought it should be R18, but they all seemed to reach an agreement that it should be shown to segregated audiences.
So in Wellington, for example, men had to go to the St James Theatre, while women would pop down the road to the Regent Theatre. How this was organised was up to the exhibitor, and it meant that occasionally men and women were present in the same room.
The first time I saw Ulysses was in a theatre like that. It was absurd. People came in, paid their money, and you had ushers, sex segregating them at the doors. There was lots of sort of, play around the fact that they were saying goodbye to the person that they'd come in with because they weren't allowed to sit next to them. It was silly, and people could see it was silly, and they laughed.
Nonetheless, it caused a lot of ink to be spilled, as Macintosh's decision was debated back and forth.
In England, too many of these pictures are being shown, and Englishmen are being known as sick men.
But why take such an extraordinary measure? Macintosh argued that the sex talk used in the film was indecent, but only in a particular context. He told a male journalist, "You and I might go into a pub and hear language used which would not offend us, but in mixed company it would be offensive." In other words, that sort of talk was fine for the rugby club, but not the living room where men and women might mix.
And I'm not sure quite whether that was because of the embarrassment factor of men watching Ulysses with women, or whether it was something deeper, perhaps more political or social commentary, particularly in Molly Bloom's soliloquy.
Show them attention, they treat you like dirt. I don't care what anybody says. It'd be much better for the world to be governed by the women in it. You wouldn't see women going and killing one another and slaughtering.
The controversy meant the film initially did great business. Aucklander Fred Symes even offered to fly businessmen from Sydney to Auckland, where they would have a day at the races, eat snapper and oysters, and finish with a viewing of Ulysses.
So yeah, heaps of stuff we've used there. We've gone mainly to the New Zealand archives. Let's go through it. This was in the New Zealand archives. There's a big folder, or one or two folders about Ulysses that the chief censor at the time and the Internal Affairs, whatever it was called at the time, have kept, and they've placed all the newspaper clippings in these folders. So we just went through that and used heaps of it. This image I think was pulled off the archives Flickr page, I think actually. And I just love it that you use the term mental defective. It's pretty strong. This was from the Alexander Turnbull Library, a pretty famous image in our history of censorship in New Zealand. And we had to have it in the show for obvious reasons. And there are other things there. I have to say, that thing at the end about Fred Symes, that's something that we could have only included by actually going to the archive. So what we did as well, my fellow researcher and I, actually spent 2 weeks and went to the archives and just poured through the stuff, and it was like the happiest 2 weeks of my life. It was amazing. It was just incredible to go through that stuff, finding a series of newspaper articles telling you about this guy this chancer who, because Ulysses was banned in Australia, set up a scheme to, fly Australian businessmen to New Zealand to go to the races, eat crayfish and watch Ulysses, because apparently it was a filthy, dirty film. Interestingly, he never completed the scheme. And then there's a newspaper article which we were able to include because of time. He had to cancel the whole thing because too many women had applied to go to New Zealand, to fly to New Zealand and go to the races and eat crayfish and watch Ulysses. And he had to stop it because it was again the same thing, and he's quoted in the paper as saying, "Well, I had to stop it because I couldn't have men and women going to the races together and going to see Ulysses together. If he'd just been a bit more open-minded, he would have probably made a killing." But those sort of things, those sort of stories that I really like finding, those personalities. I'd just love to know what this guy was like. What are we, about 15 minutes? Let's play the next clip.
This is Wellington Prison. After 85 years, it was closed in 2012. It, like other prisons around the country, had strict rules about what prisoners could get access to while incarcerated. Often material was banned for obvious reasons.
In 1946 or about 1947, the superintendents of the borstalls were writing to have certain books banned, and these being The Tunnel, The Wooden Horse, and whatever, because the lads were reading these books about Coldex, about making the keys and digging tunnels, and they were starting to see some of these occurrences happening in the prisons, particularly the youth prisons.
But not everything that was banned was as sensible.
When we first got videos, only G videos could be shown in a prison. So that actually made Bambi a banned film because it was GA.
In the early part of the 20th century, newspapers going into prisons were heavily censored.
Anything to do with crime, the reporting of crime, the reporting of justice, the prison authorities having to try and black stuff out that they didn't want the prisoners to read or know about, but keeping the stuff that they wanted them to know about. So I can well imagine that being, oh, this is great. We can shut out the report on the latest burglary at Mrs. Jones's, but then we can report on what the burglar got.
I delete all matter relative to strikes or of a socialistic or political nature, sporting news, and all matter relative to racing or betting, and local news I do not consider prisoners should see. Generally, newspapers were cut with scissors, but prisoners complained that the papers ended up being so mutilated they could hardly read what was left. Blotting out articles with ink was unsatisfactory because it would seep through and obscure the other side. These letters held in the archives show how the problem was solved and gives a unique view of the strange peculiarities of censorship. In 1927, the superintendent of Auckland Prison excitedly wrote to the Controller General of Prisons.
I have to advise you that I have purchased a stick of Chinese marking ink, and the result of the experimental use has proved most satisfactory.
Finally, a solution had been found. So impressed was the controller, he ordered other prisons to use the new ink and provided instructions. And that worked well for a number of years. But in 1948, disaster struck. Our stock of this ink, used for censoring magazines, etc., is nearly exhausted. I shall be pleased if efforts could be made to buy some for this institution. The controller was desperate. The government printing office suggested using the offset bronze blue applied with a finger, but the practice of censoring newspapers was stopped before anyone had to get dirty.
Cool, so that's the Chinese ink incident of 1927. And that's one of the sequences in the documentary series that I wish I could redo, because I don't think we quite got what we were reading as we were going through the archives. So that whole segment literally came about while we were in the archives, and I went to, well, hang on, obviously prisons have to censor and control information. We should really have a look into that. Can you go to some of the Department of Corrections files in the archives and have a look and see if you can find some good stories there? And the Chinese ink incident of 1927, there's just this range of frenzied correspondence going back and forth between wardens and the controller, just going, oh my God, we're running out of ink. You have to give us this ink. And I don't think it was quite clear in the segment. The ink was good because it didn't seep through to the other side. So you could actually, censor one side of the paper but still read the other if need be. I don't think we quite managed to convey just the panic that was just flying off the pages of these typed messages and telegrams of people just going, "We need this ink. Where is it?" Because it was starting to run out, and the Chinese shop in Auckland that they were buying it from had said, "Oh, sorry, we haven't got any more. It's just run out." And then they eventually just kind of stopped censoring the papers at all. But it's those kind of stories. Unexpected stuff that we were really excited by and fascinated by, and that wouldn't have come around if there weren't things like the archives or other institutions like that. Again, this is all coming from the archives, and this is actually photographs that we took at the archives, high-res photographs, just on a DSLR to use for the. I love this guy. This is like. Who is Jay Mertens? Why are Englishmen sick men? And there's a really unfortunate picture of him as well. So we would find stuff like that, just weird, and I really love the sort of unexpected weird stuff that you find in history, particularly when you're going through archives like these. So let's dig a little deeper and look at actually some of the tools. We've got about 10 minutes, probably went a bit longer on that than I should have, but that's okay. Digital NZ, I had a conversation with my production manager, Alice, who was my production manager, our production manager at the time. And what would happen was, obviously, I'd go out, and Will and I would go out and find all this stuff and kind of file all these stills, video, documents that we wanted to use, then I'd go away and write the script. And I'd mark, this is one we want to use. Alice would actually go, as the production manager, go away and negotiate the rights, work out how much you have to pay someone. For example, have to pay the film archive, to get a telecine or a digital file of a particular video or something like that. And I was talking to Alice about this keynote, and I sort of agreed with her that Digital NZ was a lifesaver for a lot of reasons. Firstly, it's, as you know, a one-stop shop. We used it every day. And it meant that, firstly, we could access collections that we weren't even aware existed, because they're all accessed by Digital NZ. All these filters and things were amazing time savers. The timeline there, we can search within a particular time period. Excuse me, particularly the rights usage stuff became very helpful, particularly at the end when we were running out of money, so we're trying to find stuff that was public domain that we didn't have to pay for. And also, I kind of forgot our login, so I couldn't take any pictures of our sets. Using sets, so you create, as you probably know, you create these sets of material. So I'd go in, find all these sets, I'd be able to refer to them in the sets. In my script, Alice could go in, find the set and also find the image or the video file or the whatever, and find it very quickly. It was all just sort of self-contained and organised, so we found it really helpful. And yeah, as I say, a lifesaver as far as production was concerned. Papers Plus, I can't stop saying Papers Plus. Papers Past is pretty much the shit, as far as I'm concerned. And even before working on the naughty bits, I was going to this almost daily, looking up stuff just at random. Really helpful in the fact that obviously it's you can search for stuff. As you can see, well, it's probably a bit small, but you can see you can download it in a really high resolution, which is great for video work. We used Papers Plus a lot, Papers Past a lot. I swear I'm not doing that on purpose. Even just to get those backgrounds you might have seen in some of the clips, and Jeremy being an Adobe After Effects wizard would use them as backgrounds and stuff like that, and it lent the whole thing. We couldn't have done it without Papers Past. I got it. And that's using. As a user, I found both sites pretty easy to use. I did notice, because I had to go back to Papers Past and look for that Psyche cartoon that you saw, the full Psyche cartoon that you saw earlier. I did notice that it was hard to search for as an illustration. For some reason, it wasn't coming up as Psyche, although I did find it eventually. Although I'm really excited, I'm really interested I think there's a presentation by someone from Papers Past from the library later on today, so I'm going to be really interested to see that. Both those sites were amazing. We also went as part of the archives. Archives were huge, as I said before, and the National Film Unit stuff is incredible. We used that a lot, and not just specifically, but also as kind of overlay. If we needed something that was old-timey and kind of sort of vaguely related, we'd use stuff from the National Film Unit stock that the archives have. I found this site, and I don't know what it is, essentially. And then, what you do is you click on there, want to look at, like, for example, Antarctic Adventure, because it sounds amazing. Then you come to this little, like, QuickTime kind of thing, and it was, a tiny box about that big, which is absolutely no use to us at all. I understand why the site's there. What was more useful, and this maybe is not, is that the fact that they'd put everything at some point up on YouTube. It's really easy for production companies to actually pull video from YouTube. It's a really, really simple thing. And we actually found the fact that it was on YouTube and searchable and all that sort of stuff a lot more easier than, say, using that website there. I mean, it's fine. It's totally cool. It lists all the information. I'm not ragging on it. But for our purposes as a production company, it was actually awesome that it was on YouTube and we could use that. We could pull down the low-res video, use that as a placeholder. Once we knew what we were going to use, then we could, go back to the archives and sort of order it in a high-res file. So, with 6 minutes left, let's just go over some sort of things that, from a production company, from a TV documentary and a filmmaking perspective, that we'd like to see. I actually don't have that much to say about copyright and rights and stuff like that. To me, it's fairly transparent. You either get the rights to do it, you get the permission to do it, or you don't. Obviously, it's super complicated, particularly, we had a couple of times going, for example, to the Film Archive, trying to use something, trying to find out actually who owned the rights, whether they were still alive, who they were, was really difficult. We had to work with the Film Archive in that respect. And then other times, it was very easy. You just went to someone, you found out where they were, and you just asked them, can you use it? Got permission to use that, paid your fee and all that sort of stuff. So I don't really have a lot to say on the copyright. Obviously, the interesting thing for me coming in the naughty bits was I'd always worked in news, and so it's covered by that sort of fair use aspect in legislation. So you basically, if you're criticising or using it for a review, that sort of thing, you can use anything, it's fine, you just go for it. But making something like the naughty bits was the first time I really had to think about, oh no, you have to go and ask someone if you can use this stuff. So it was a real eye-opener for me. Fortunately, our production manager, Alice, was on top of all that and really knew what to do. Interestingly, this came up last night. Old Auckland is a Facebook page run by someone I'm not entirely sure who. Basically, they just end up put up old photographs of old Auckland. It's super interesting. It's like about 20,000 people. I think they've actually been asked to take down, because they've been using lots from Auckland libraries, and I think they've just been asked to take down stuff. And this sort of indicates how difficult, as I'm sure you're well aware, the issues of rights and copyright and stuff is. Obviously, they've been asked to take down anything that's been taken from the Auckland libraries and their digitisation and their website. I completely understand, because obviously, interestingly, they're suggesting here that Facebook's terms and conditions are unacceptable to be using stuff from Auckland libraries. Obviously, there's issues of rights, and you have to uphold the rights of the donor, whoever's donated the material. But also, on the other hand, there's over 20,000 people following that Facebook. There's a real engagement there with the audience, and I'm not quite sure, where I stand on that. I've sort of got sympathies on both sides, I think. Time code. This is strictly for video. So, for example, you've got a film, like a film canister of some stuff you want to chuck up, digitise and throw up onto a website so people can go and use it, and then, you'll say to them, okay, so for 5 seconds use, it's this much amount of money. We have to know, we have to tell you exactly which bits we want to use. So if you digitise something from a source and put it online, that digital file, that low-res digital file, will be completely different to the original source, object, like the film or something like that. What that means is that because of the way you capture it, if in the film someone's taking a cup of tea, on the film it happens at a different time to the time on the digital file. Basically, it's out of sync, right? Because you're digitising, you're creating a completely new thing. So it would really help us as a production companies, and again, this is time, money, resource. I know that not everybody has great budgets to do this sort of thing, particularly time-intensive stuff, is put a time code on the digital file that matches the time code of the original film or whatever you're pulling it from. So we know exactly, we can go back to you and go, we want something from 11 seconds and to 14:20 or something like that. It also means that it's a handy little watermark if you don't want people sort of stealing, ripping stuff off your site and stealing it as well and using it willy-nilly. So that would be really helpful. That's actually probably one of the main key things, I think, that would make it easier if you're looking to put video up and that people want to use and that you want to maybe monetize a bit or something like that, or you want to get some money to help pay for digitizing stuff. Format. When this has been done to a little bit when listing, for example, this is the actual film unit page again. Heaps of information there about what the viewing copies format is, what the technical details are, that's great. If you're making it available as a digital file, is it a DV? Is it RM? Is it AVI? Is it WMV? Is it MKV? Is it MOV? Is it MP4? Is it MPG? Is it MPEG? Is it M4V? Because we're now in the age of digital video, there's so many file formats, codecs, containers, and we need to know if we're going to use that. What would be helpful to know is exactly what format stuff is in, to the point of what the codec is, what the container is, all what the file size, everything. Because it means that once we have that information, for example, we can go, okay, well that will need to be encoded, we can put that in the budget. If it only exists as film, we can go, okay, we need to budget for getting it transferred to video, telecine, or digitized like that, and we can budget for that right from the get-go. Communication, I found communication was excellent, pretty much across the board, all the institutions we work with. My time's up, but that's okay. That doesn't fit. So we've come to the end. I want to experience the world as ideas flowing through people. We saw this before at the start. And I kind of think that's also something that I think you guys do, working in the glam sector. That's kind of how I experience the world. It's one of the ways I experience ideas flowing through people, because obviously you have collections that are all to do with people that have been made by people. And I like to think that as a documentary filmmaker, we kind of, in a weird way, are in the same business and we're all working together. Thank you.